Good morning. This is another great day for Mississippi. I am proud to hear the roar this morning in the Capitol. I think it is a roar of opportunity. Winston Churchill once said they had called him, and I may be borrowing this from the speaker, but I'm going to. They once called Winston Churchill the Lion of England, and he said, I was not the Lion of England, the people were. I just simply had the opportunity to roar. I'm going to roar this morning because it is time. We have been talking about how we might be able to support funding for roads and bridges and repairs for years now. There's a lot of people I want to thank here today. I want to thank them for realizing that it is time, today, now, that we pass this bill. I see mayors, supervisors, road builders, supervisors and mayors understand more than most of us how important their infrastructure needs are. And this bill will get them the funding to be able to address those challenges. It will do it this session. This special session will give us an opportunity to begin to put real dollars into those needs in FY19, not somewhere into the future, but now. See, in April, I had to make a difficult decision to close over 500 bridges across the state of Mississippi. Bridges that were unsafe, bridges that really challenged the very safety of the motoring public. But I also made a decision at that time to move forward with funding, not just to close those bridges for the sake of closing them, but make sure that we had an opportunity to fund their repairs. The Mississippi legislature had the foresight under the leadership of the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker to put $50 million into a fund, so immediately the Bond Commission was able to meet and put $25 million of those funds into local bridge, to our state aid road program. I call that a good beginning. Today, this legislature will vote on the Mississippi Infrastructure Modernization Act. It is a historic piece of legislation that will put more than $200 million a year into infrastructure across the state of Mississippi. In the next 5 years, this bill, if passed in totality, will add $1.1 billion to infrastructure. I think we have heard you call upon us to make a decision. Now, this was not done overnight or behind closed doors. Leadership of the House and Senate has been working on this since April. Our doors are always open. It's always interesting to me that sometimes members complain, oh, we didn't have access, and I never receive a call from them. They never knocked on our door and said, could I be a part of it? The last 2 weeks, I've called many of them in the opposition party and said, come to the office, let me explain to you what we're doing. There's nothing to hide here. This is completely transparent. I'm not running for re-election. I don't need to campaign on anything. The leadership here in the House and Senate understand it's time to get this done. We don't need to wait another week, another month, another 6 months. Repairs must begin immediately. You will see the funding revenue generated by the internet sales tax. The Supreme Court made 2 important decisions in June regarding sports betting and internet sales tax, giving us the opportunity to capture new revenue coming to the state and dedicate it to infrastructure. Now, those that could argue, well, it ought to go somewhere else, I appreciate that argument. That's part of the legislative process. But in fact, our need today is for infrastructure. That's where it will go. We have a sinking fund, revenue that comes in at $3 million a month. We'll be able to take that $3 million of revenue and bond $300 million. But you see, that's called revenue bonds because we have a source of revenue to pay that debt off. Not general obligation bonds that would add additional burden to our debt in the state of Mississippi. So we think all put together with that, sports betting, the vehicle user fee, the state lottery, I know there's some difficult decisions that have to be made here. I will tell you the state lottery is not my favorite source of revenue. But decisions have to be made. You have to weigh what you would like and what needs to be done. And we need funding for infrastructure in the state of Mississippi, and this is a large opportunity to capture that revenue. I will tell you just now, Mississippians are spending some $15 million a year in Louisiana, the lottery. They will probably have to go back in and readjust their revenue numbers. I hope they do. We're going to work hard to make sure that we are able to generate those revenues. Let me thank the Mississippi Supervisors Association, Mississippi Municipal League, the Mississippi Road Builders, and particularly the Mississippi Economic Council. Scott Waller and the team at MEC has helped lead this. For several years now, I've met with them. We've discussed the possibilities. I appreciate their support and how they have been able to rally their membership to say it is now time to pass this bill, to get this done. They've got to go to work, so I'm going to call on them very quickly. The Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker have done a remarkable job. Legislation is never easy under the best of circumstances, but when the governor calls you in on a special session, it makes it even more difficult. I remember being in the legislature. Nobody particularly liked a special session. They were willing to come together and work. I want to call on the Lieutenant Governor now for comments and then recognize after that the Speaker of the House. These two men are statesmen. Now today on the floor they will probably entertain questions that will seem somewhat difficult. And we'll wonder what's taking so long, but it is part of the legislative process and we want to be completely transparent. People will talk about how difficult this bill is. Oh, it's so many pages. Well, look at the underlined sections of the bill because that's the new language. There's nothing new here. I believe shortly after the session ended, probably late April, I talked to a group of reporters here and told you exactly what we were going to use as a revenue source. I'd pull that column and look back and say it's exactly what we're doing here today. No surprises. We're going to get it done. The man is going to help us get it done is the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House, the men, and I want to call on the Lieutenant Governor now for comments and thank him for the hard work and dedication, and after that, we'll recognize the Speaker of the House.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. The good news for everyone here is that we do gavel in at 10 o'clock this morning, so neither one of us can speak for very long, but it is very, very important that we take this opportunity to thank everybody who is in this crowd today. All of the mayors, all of the supervisors, all of the members of the Mississippi Economic Council, those in the industry and others, because your strong desires to work to get a solution to this very challenging problem that our state is facing, but let's be honest, that every state is facing challenges in infrastructure, would not have happened, and we would not be where we are today without all of you. And so I want to thank you for your efforts over the last several months. But I also want to particularly thank Speaker Gunn and his team. We have worked diligently, certainly since the end of the legislative session, but I will tell you, the last week of the legislative session, I bet he and I spent 12, 14, 16 hours a day trying to hash out details, and it's from that foundation where we find ourselves today. And so I want to thank him, and I want to thank the members of the House and the members of the Senate. Because while we think we have a plan that's going to be voted on today that is a good plan, at the end of the day, it is the individual members of the House and the individual members of the Senate that are the ones who actually have to cast the votes today to make this become a reality. And so the governor's leadership has been critical to getting us to where we are today. The House's willingness to discuss this with us and work through the details, because when you're in the legislative process, the details matter. The words on the page really matter. And so sometimes it takes longer than any of us would like. Sometimes we don't get everything that we want. But the reality is the end solution today is over $1 billion more in public infrastructure in Mississippi over the next 5 years. And that is a win for everybody. That is not a Republican issue. Infrastructure is not a Republican issue. Infrastructure is not a Democrat issue. Infrastructure is an issue for all Mississippians. And I hope we see this bipartisan solution have bipartisan support so that we can get people working to get our infrastructure woes solved. So thank you very much for being here, and let's work together to make this happen over the next few days.
Well, Well, good morning, and thank you so much for being here. We do have somewhere we have to be shortly, so I'm going to be brief. I just have three things I want to say. The first is the legislative process is a team sport, and this point to which we find ourselves today would not be possible without the work of the team. It's been my privilege to work with the governor and the lieutenant governor on this issue. I want to thank the lieutenant governor and his staff for the way they have worked with me and my staff to get us to this point. This could not happen without us coming together and working together to address this very important issue. The second thing I want to say is to those of you who are here, thank you for your level of interest in this issue. If anyone doubts this is an important issue, all they have to do is look at the people who are here today. Supervisors, municipal league, road builders. If anyone is inclined to not support this issue, I would invite them to pay attention to the people who are watching, the level of interest that this thing generates. But more importantly, think about your citizens. Your citizens are watching. People back home who really count, the voters who really count, are watching what happens here today. And they expect us to come home with a plan that helps improve their quality of life. And then finally, I want to say this is a process. We are starting that process today. We're going to work throughout this day to try to continue to hammer out the details of these bills. You need to be aware that we are going to pass bills on each side of this building. Those bills will come across, and we will work throughout the day to hammer out those details. So this is just the beginning of a process, and we hope that at the end of the day, either today or tomorrow, we will have brought home to the people a plan that will help improve their roads, their bridges, their safety, economic development, and the quality of life that we all enjoy. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your attention.
Thank you.